Did you hand it out when you went through it, or did we look at it with our own?
Yeah, so the document, I think I'll repost it.
It's both reposted and all of the committee members have the printout, and if somebody is missing it, I have 2 extras that I.
No, I haven't read it. I have.
It should be.
Did you see that?
What are you working on? The same document, we had last week, so it should be 102 pages.
Yeah.
It's house by house.
Yeah, I got it.
So someone's already
Deadline.
primarily right now.
You said 2 days. Okay. You have one of these? Question?
Wow.
Bill, we're gonna go through the bill through and close out the sections. You already walked through it with us.
Yeah, that's why you're asking. We're doing language, and I didn't have something. Not to go to say that.
To go number?
Yeah.
Called the web report.
And that document sent to Norris is maybe, if you have.
Yeah, I want this copy because the page numbers and everything would be wrong.
I got another copy for that.
This one.
Do you have?
Yes.
I'll have one more copy.
I have one more copy. I just looked at your files. I'm pretty sure you all have.
Find it in the file.
This version.
You don't want that version? What you make? One, two.
Yeah.
Page 193.
Ask you questions since we're here. Why is it that long? Like we're done.
Dramatic effect.
Okay. I mean, I don't care.
It's that big of a bill.
It's so big to have like all the letters.
Exactly.
I don't have that one.
You don't call it
You have this
Yeah.
version. Yeah, I have that version too, but,
You lost?
Yeah.
Yeah.
why should have said this one?
Yeah. This is, I mean, you can follow along with them. It's the same letters. And then we're
Pages.
in the same
Yeah,
order,
numbers too.
all in the same order, but just so, if he says page 4, where it'll be lost.
I might be lost anyway.
I didn't.
Thanks over there.
Do you have?
I appreciate you're very tight.
Neither of these.
It's very good.
That's not.
In contrast too.
This is short.
So the difference is. At least we have evidence.
What's it doing in my spot?
I have no idea.
Just,
Okay. Brady, take us somewhere.
Are we live?
Yeah.
Oh,
well,
We've been live for all of
Live.
This is gonna be exciting.
you don't get to me.
No, still in the land of the living. Right, so you don't want to wait for the room to fill out a little bit more. Okay, Grady Nixon, Joint Fiscal Office. So we're going through the same document we went through last week. It should be 102 pages and have those highlights in it. If there's no change from the House as passed version of the bill, this is page 493, the big bill. As we go through this, just to flag for the committee, there was the technical letter from the administration. There are a number of proposed changes that the Joint Fiscal Office has reviewed and determined to be technical in nature, and then some that we still have some outstanding questions on. So there are some sections that the committee may close out with the understanding that there are technical tweaks to them, and then some that I would recommend the committee hold open pending further review of those recommended changes from the administration. On section A101 on page 1, this is just the purpose and legislative intent section. So the House added sub B, which aligns with some proposed closeout language that they included in their version of the bill. The administration recommended including here some language acknowledging that there are capital appropriations in the bill, because section B1103 of the bill pulls in the appropriations made in the House Capital Bill. So the administration recommends reflecting that here. So this section of the Senate budget would include some language acknowledging that for the administration's recommendation. Same with section A102. just recommendations to acknowledge capital bill appropriations. And in section A103 definitions, they propose to include a definition of what a capital appropriation is. And that may just be the same as the language we used for Act 113. The same thing is done.
I don't see a capital appropriation definition.
Right. So the administration recommends including it in A103. So the Senate version of the bill.
I see what you mean. Okay,
A104.
so you already went through these sections.
Yes.
So our goal is to close out any selections that we want to have. So before you go on, as you're saying, we probably want to keep 103 open to have the definitions, and they also have technical changes to make too. But is that 101?
So A101, 102, and 103, they're all just neat tweaks that would align language with Act 113 to reflect capital appropriations. So those would just be technical in nature. But the language would look slightly different.
So I'm going to say we're keeping them open just so we have those technical changes. May A100, you're closing that.
And then the rest of the A sections are standard annual legislation. So that brings you through to A108, the legend section.
So we can close out all of those with their standards. Okay, and the legend.
Beginning on page 6, the section B1100, I would recommend the committee hold that open. There will, of course, be further discussions of the one-time appropriation section that will be dealt with through a table and committee discussion, and then the final language will just reflect those committee decisions. So I think probably it's just to skip over that right now because there are a number of outstanding decisions relating to it.
You know,
Skipping ahead to page 14, section B1101, which begins at the bottom of page 13. And you'll see the language for it on page 14. This is fiscal year closeout language, the House included. I think that the discussions on what to do regarding fiscal year closeout are still open. So keep that section open for now.
Yeah.
Same with section B1103. This is the section where those cash fund appropriations are being made. So this section should likely stay open for now. Section C100 on page 15. So this is this was in the GovRec. The House made no change to it. It's just adjusting the appropriations for public safety.
because of the RFR.
Exactly.
So we'll close that. That section C101,
C
C100.
and C101 is the same thing, but for fish and wildlife.
Okay,
Section C102 on the bottom of page 16, continuing on to page 17. This is where the House reduced the GovRec T fund transfer to the TID fund from 2.3 million to 900,000.
can't remember why that was, but
By reducing that transfer, it left 1.4 million in transportation fund that could then be used for electric vehicle supply equipment, chargers.
it's still confusing to me because that money was supposed to come from DMV in the efficient electric vehicle infrastructure charge. But I don't know why they have to touch the TID fund.
So it's reducing the transfer by 1.4 million. It's not taking any money out of the TID fund. It's just not pushing that 1.4 million to it.
But the money going into the TIP fund wouldn't ever come from DNB.
I can't speak to where exactly that 1.4 million came from, but this just by not doing the $2.3 million transfer, it added 1.4 million to the T fund, or kept 1.4 million in the T fund to use for a one-time appropriation.
I'm just worried about why they did it that way. Doesn't make sense.
Doesn't make sense to me because registrations never have gone to the TID.
Right. TIP fund is only the assessment on fuel purchases, should have nothing to do with
Which has nothing to do with registrations.
or the 1.4 that was going to go for the EV charges. So this was in the gut rec and then the House just approved it. Or House, it's also in the House.
The GovRec had a $2.3 million transfer. The House only transferred 900,000
In the trade, so the guts transfer was the same from the TIP fund.
from the transportation fund to the TID fund for 2.3 million. This is a transfer of 900,000 instead.
But I want to leave it open because it seems to me to be counter to what we were going to do with the infrastructure. And I just don't know why the TIP fund is involved with all that.
Yeah, me either.
And
Because it's a wholesale tax and gasoline in the TID fund, all its own.
and
And it's. I don't
it
get
makes
it.
sense to you, Ron? I'm studying it, and I don't get it. Right, so we have the current chair of transportation and two former chairs of transportation that don't.
You know, that, I just definitely.
Okay, well, I'm sure there's an answer. We'll just
Yeah.
try to figure it out. Yeah, check it out. That'd be awesome. Thanks. Okay, 103.
Section C103, so this is where the House added in language that was in the first budget adjustment, relating to 1.8 million for local economic damage grants, for flood impacted communities. In sub W on page 19, this reduced a one-time appropriation to the treasurer that was added in the second budget adjustment bill. So it reduced that appropriation that was in the second budget adjustment bill from 14 million to 4 million. And then X included the 2.8 million for VHCB to complete the developmentally disabled housing pilot. And it includes an appropriation to the judiciary for 850,000 for network security and bathroom upgrade. There's some interplay with the technical letter here, and then there's also some language from the budget adjustment the committee may want to review for inclusion in the budget. So I would recommend just leaving this section open for now.
Because there was additional language in the VA that addressed these items.
So there was language in the budget adjustment that was modifying one-time appropriations in the 1100 of Act 113. These specific ones were pulled out of the budget adjustment, but some of that budget adjustment language may still be addressed in the budget.
Leave that open.
That's a question.
Yes, Senator White.
So going back to the 1.8 million, that was for flood relief. Was that the Addison County thing or the other, is there more in the Addison County?
So it's the Addison money and then also communities that were impacted by the 2024 floods.
So both.
Yes.
Okay.
Addison for 23, everybody else for 24.
Correct. Section C104 on page 20. So this was in the GovRec. This was language just expanding the allowable use of a prior year appropriation relating to the non-federal share related to disaster spending for federally declared disasters. The technical letter has some minor tweaks on this, just clarifying more explicitly that it's for state match. So just updating the GovRec language there. And then the second budget adjustment also included amendments to this one-time section of Act 78. So if that language from the budget adjustment were to live on in this bill, then it would be reflected here most likely. So this section, again, I would recommend keeping open for now pending further committee decisions.
C104.
Section C105. This is language allowing for the Secretary of Administration to reimburse up to 14.3 million of prior year federal funds expended through ERAF as approved by the Joint Fiscal Committee with new general fund appropriations transferred from existing state programs that meet eligibility criteria established by the U.S. Treasury. This was GovRec language that the House approved.
Close that out.
Section C106, this is a section that again relates to all of the sort of closeout language. So I would recommend keeping it open pending decisions on the closeout from the committee. And this was language updating the closeout language that is in the Budget Adjustment Act. So there's an interplay there as well. Section C107 is language stating that of the 7 million general fund that was authorized by the Emergency Board for BGAP, 2 million shall be used for agreement to BETA to establish a disaster relief fund. The House modified the construct of this language, but the language itself was originally in the GovRec, and they didn't amend any of the dollar amounts or anything there.
I want to leave this open.
Section D100, this is the annual property transfer tax allocation section. The House made no changes from the GovRec.
And this is just like based on the formulas of. In the D section, this is FY26. So how do they know what the amounts of?
Yeah, so I believe this is per statute, and the committee may recall there was language in the Budget Adjustment Acts or bills to align the PTT allocation of Act 113 with the Act 181 changes. So there need to be some updates there, but this is reflective. The D100 section here is reflective of current law.
It doesn't. Is there like a year delay on the property transfer tax? I guess I'm not remembering how that works. Like, well, it's because it's all by formula. Did they wait till the end of the year and then do it by formula in the next year?
I would assume so, since it's
You gotta wait till all the money's in. You
Yeah.
can't do it like, we don't do it monthly or quarterly or.
ready.
But we can pose it.
Thank you, Zach.
Yes.
Wondering about in D103, section D, this notwithstanding language, does that affect the pension split?
Yes, so it's notwithstanding that section of statute. And so that was part of this year-end construct. There are a few different sections that touch on that. So this would be amending a section of Act 113, that's the Budget Adjustment Act added into Act 113. So this language or any language relating to the year-end contract would look quite different in the Senate version of the bill.
And we left this open.
Do you want that?
The,
C106 amending D13.
Right, yes.
we did. Thank you. I think I. Thank you.
Section D 101 on page 24, this is the fund transfer section. I would again recommend that the committee just skip over this section for now. The transfers and reversions and reserves will all be dealt with separately and then just reflected, amended to reflect committee decisions later on. And so that carries us forward on page 30, section E 100, positions.
What about D 103? Reserves,
Right, so
we just,
those numbers may be tweaked pending committee discussions. So you'll see, for instance, on page 29 in sub D, there's language again relating to that $136 million pot of money related to the closeout. So
we got half of these.
right. Section E 100. So the House added language for permanent classified positions, one pre-charge administrator at the Office of the Attorney General. The establishment of the permanent positions established through existing vacant positions. So that's the position pool. Criminal Justice Council, one canine head trainer, and 2 positions at the Human Rights Commission, and then also language authorizing the extension of 9 limited service positions through FY26 at the Department of State Attorneys and Sheriffs. And if the committee has discussed those positions at all or any other positions the committee may add. So this section probably stay open for now.
Yeah, stay open because there's other positions we'll be talking about.
Section E 100.1, community-based organizations report. This is a report from the Secretary of Administration relating to a comprehensive analysis of the current funding structure for Vermont community-based organizations. The report would be due to the General Assembly on or before January 15th, 2026.
So. Let's leave it open.
Yeah, I think this one.
I was talking before you were here, Senator Locke, about there's a connection between this study and the study in page 13.
Exactly.
Section E 100.2 would be another report from the Secretary of Administration. This would be to the Joint Fiscal Committee at each of its November or at each of its calendar year 2025 meetings on any reductions to federal revenues to the state and the status of any appropriations impacted by such reductions.
And then did the technical letter or the Dear Jane letter, they had concerns about the way this was worded, if I remember correctly, or maybe those were just conversation.
There was nothing in the technical letter. I can't recall if there was anything in the Dear Senator Birchlight letter.
Doesn't sound as good.
But there, so this is with regard to appropriations money, not any reductions in federal revenues. Is there anywhere in here that we have language about changes in guidelines or rules about how you use the federal dollars that we do get? Or is this a place that does?
There's no language in the bill on that currently.
It might be helpful to have that.
This is just about if there's reduction.
Yeah, so just money, but there might be strings attached in a different way.
But this one's just I think there was another section that was because this is just them report.
Correct.
Yeah,
But we can close this one,
which one?
this 102, this report, because this is just the AOA basically reporting to direct this folks.
But if they're reporting and there are changes to the guidelines and how the money is used along with reductions or any changes, it might have implications about what we accept and not accept.
Do you think that, but Joyce
So spoke with that. language to this.
Something there, yeah.
But I mean, if it's a new thing, I mean, at some point, direct fiscal would have to okay it if it was changed or something.
Yes,
Be approved.
but if they're not reporting any of the changes that the federal government is making, you know, whether it's HSS or anyone else, AOE, whatever,
Okay,
then we won't know. And
so we'll leave it open and Brady will add some language that's reporting the changes and any reductions and any of the changes to the use. of it.
yeah, the rules.
Section E 100.3 relates to reporting on ARPA funds. So in Act 113, Section E 106, there was language relating to the deadline for the obligation of ARPA funds that allowed for the administration to revert and re-obligate funds or sort of reappropriate funds. And this has reporting requirements related to two types. So any new spending authority that was established on ARPA funds for ARPA appropriations, and then reporting on any funds that were reverted, and then spending authority using general fund dollars for those related projects. So this would be reporting on those projects and appropriations.
Yeah. I think we can close that out.
Section E 105, this relates to the general fund transfer to the Communications and Information Technology Fund. The GovRec had 15 million, the House bill had 10 million, and this language directs ADS to rather than bill back for any remaining expenses to the extent that that transfer is insufficient to complete the transition from the SLA model to a core enterprises service model, to request additional funds as part of the FY26 budget adjustment process.
So they would just have to carry the debt, maybe a year or longer.
And request additional funds in the FY26 BAA process.
Kind of instead of billing the agencies and having them come in the VA, it was ADS would come.
Correct.
We would need this language, even if we changed what the dollar amount was. But we don't need this one.
If
It doesn't matter what the dollar amount,
if
unless it's 15 million, then we're good.
right, if it's right on the dollar amount, but if the committee intended to prevent that billing back, then language like this would be necessary.
I think we can close it out unless somebody disagrees. We might change the money, but I don't think it matters. And if we end up doing the full amount, but you know, language is kind of still harmless. All right.
Section E 111. So this is one of 3 annual income tax link up sections that were added by the House.
Which we always do.
Same with section E 111.1.
If we did do it, all sorts of 12.
Yes, I believe so.
We'll close out those 3.
And section E 111.2 is not necessarily directly related to that boilerplate link up, but this is just amending statute to say that a surviving spouse shall file a joint Vermont personal income tax return rather than may, unless the commissioner allows a different filing status. So it's a technical update of that filing.
Okay.
Section E 127. So this is language relating to the allowable use. This is some of the language relating to interim ways that federal funding reductions might be addressed by the General Assembly or by the Joint Fiscal Committee and the Emergency Board when the General Assembly is not in session. I would recommend leaving this section open for now and further decisions on this.
Yes. Yes, there was.
For leaving it open, wondering if there's new language that is on page 37. Is there something new about the language on page 35 that's what's highlighted, or is that
No, it's just
individual?
just to signal that it's a House edit section.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
Yes, Chair.
Yes.
Can I ask on the new language on 37 and 38? Am I understanding it right that a reduction of federal funds, which results in a 1% or more reduction, would not allow any unilateral power increase in the executive branch? Secretary of Administration would need JFC approval. And then JFC permissive language could come to the E-Board. Okay, so we're not powering the administration to act unilaterally.
Correct.
Okay, and I really think we have to clarify that, given that the governor has had over the past couple of years different ideas about what emergency powers he has, different ideas from the legislature.
And now on page 36, when did we decide about the 5% piece? Right in the middle of the page, began page line 12. The secretary may implemented an expenditure reduction plan. But everything else is held, everything's held harmless, excuse me. If the appropriation does not exceed 5%. But now we talked about this, but I didn't know whether we had decided.
What's your question? I'm not sure.
Is this an appropriate decision-making authority by the secretary? That they can implement an expenditure reduction plan, 5% for any delivery of services, as long as they don't unduly affect any single function, program, service, benefit, or county. So, I mean, that kind of states it plainly. And there's no approval, and is there a note not requiring approval of the joint fiscal?
It's under 5%. Doesn't require.
There's no notice either.
Other than the
Finally, the Joint Fiscal Office.
So the notice would be the joint fiscal.
And so that is current law. If I recall correctly, the committee did have some discussions regarding the word unduly there.
Right.
Potentially further amendments to current statute. I would recommend that the committee, this section and the following sections, E127.1 and E127.2, as they all touch on this authority to address spending for revenue reductions, be held open pending further committee decisions.
Right.
Yeah.
Chair.
Yeah.
Grady, if we could go back to page 35. This was a question I asked you last time we went through. And it's at the bottom of page B1. Except as otherwise, and this is current law, except as otherwise provided in subsection F of this section, in each instance that the official state revenue estimate for the general fund, blah, 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 has been reduced. My question was, an official state revenue estimate, are those the currently, we do them how many times a year?
January and July.
So could the administration, for instance, ask for another official state revenue estimate?
Yes. So the contract with Quebec and Associates allows for more than just the two consensus revenue forecasts, but the forecast. It's not my impression that the administration would have a unilateral forecast. It would be an additional consensus revenue forecast.
Both the legislators, the economists, and the administration's economists, to be a consensus forecast, they both would have to do a new one. So we'd have to get ours and you'd have to get it.
Right, I'm just wondering when it says official, what that means. You're saying official means a consensus revenue forecast.
I would assume so. I would can check with Ledge Council to make sure on the particular language. But the consensus revenue forecast is the one that's adopted by the emergency board. So it's the forecast that is formally adopted January and July.
Do you want to say adopted instead of official?
Yeah, because official is a little squishy there. Adopted consensus.
Yeah, that makes it much more clear.
And then, I'm sorry, just one last question. On page 36, current law again, it says that the plan, this is in the event that the secretary implements the plan solo, it can't have an unduly disproportionate effect on any system function. And I'm wondering who determines, I mean, is it just that? Because again, the secretary's operating without consensus there. Would the legislature have to sue if we disagree?
The language as it's currently in statute doesn't provide for any mechanism to evaluate the unruliness. So to correct that is not there.
Okay.
Wondering if.
We can find like the birch. Senator Watt, next. I mean, Senator Westman, 2 W's. Westman.
The concentration has always been is on our revenues. And I'm less worried at this point about our revenues than I am the federal cuts. And the trigger to when those cuts might happen. Because when you ask for a revenue estimate of those, does that mean when Congress passes something and these are rolling out over time? So the administration has some ability to hold projects and money. Congress will come and then they will act, and the budget won't go into place until October. Do we wait and react until October? Do we, upon passage of something at the federal level, when are the tripping points? Because federal money is not an estimate the same way our revenues are. And the way they get approved. So the trigger for those federal reductions will come in waves, are looked at now in waves. And I'm worried about that. If I wait until October, I've already waited now July, August, September. I'm already partway through the year before that takes place. I'm uncomfortable about what we set as the trigger for, and who comes up with the estimates for the federal cuts. And how is that done?
So I'll touch base with Ledge Council on this. I believe that would probably mean adding or tweaking language to sub 3 on page 37. So the language there currently says, in each instance that a reduction of federal funds results in a 1% or more reduction in the total federal funds anticipated in the most recent fiscal year appropriations.
Is that when the federal government passes the budget? Is that when the budget goes into place in October?
Right. So
and some of this is, like, for example, in transportation, they're withholding grants that we've got. The grants are specific projects. I'm unclear about what that means. These, because they aren't revenue estimates the same way we look at our own revenues.
Right.
And it's and our, and the economists are probably not the ones doing the calculations.
Right, and the federal funds is not, address, you're correct, it's not addressed in the consensus forecast the same way. So again, I can flag for Ledge Council that that particular piece of this likely would need more tweaks for the committee's concerns.
Yeah, I just don't know when the triggers are. Is it when it actually goes into effect? Is it if somebody passes something in Congress? Is it when they withhold that we get, they withhold, we just had a 90-day hold on, specific projects in transportation. They're supposed to get back to us by the end of April on whether or not they're gonna let stuff go ahead. What's the key?
Well, you have time to come up with some new language.
Well, I'm just,
But I think you're a good point, but
I don't know when the dinner is and what you need.
well, it's the house, what the house means. Oh, great.
Well,
mind grading.
I mean, whenever we do that, do we get from DEVA an estimate of what the Medicaid matches might go down? And is it DEVA that comes up with that estimate? I think they would have the information on Medicaid that Car and Quebec are gonna have.
Right, so in the current language, this would be essentially at a reduction of $30 million. It's triggered.
So we get a reduction. At what point?
Right.
Is that on the passage of something in Congress? Is that when it goes into effect?
Right.
Cause it's anticipated reduction, so yeah.
Before we get a letter,
Or we get the administration that withhold said,
no, you're right.
I don't know what that means.
Well,
And for us, I think if a July 1st date is way different than an October date because we lose a quarter.
Okay.
so yeah, so just on that, it seems like they're, particularly because there's waves to it, it makes me wonder about, something like a cumulative effect, right? Like cuts in July may equal $30 million, but they may not, but by the time we get to October, maybe they do, but any individual instance may not total that amount. I mean, it might, and then this would get triggered. Wondering about adding word, something about cumulative effect.
Well, we know we have to clarify the language in there, and then if Senator Farouk, if you want to change the language from unduly disproportionate to something else too, we could also.
Yeah, I don't see why not, as long as we're in this section.
So Grady has work to do with those that have suggestions. Let's move on to E1.7.1.
So E127.1, E127.2 relate to the use of the general fund balance reserve to address similar concerns and reductions to federal funding. So again, I would recommend the committee leave this open pending decisions on how to address those potentialities. This would allow for the General Assembly to unreserve and transfer an amount not to exceed 10% of the balance reserve to fund unforeseen or emergency needs. And in sub 3 on page 40, it allows for the emergency board in response to a declared emergency while the General Assembly is not in session or a reduction in state revenue estimates or federal funding pursuant to subsection 704B of this title occurring while the General Assembly is not in session to unreserved and make available an amount not to exceed 10% of the balance reserved to replenish the spending authority impacted by the declared emergency or reduction in funding in order to maintain a balanced state budget, minimize impact to Vermonters, and abide by legislative intent set forth by the General Assembly, limiting any amount provided to any agency or department to the original amount appropriated by the General Assembly. So that would amend allowable uses of the general fund balance reserve to address individually impacted departments and agencies while the General Assembly is not in session.
And people, well, we're gonna talk about all that.
Section E-131 on page 41. This is language that was recommended from the treasurer that the House incorporated, making various updates to the Vermont Saves program.
Was this in the BA,
I
the position title?
so there were requested changes to position titles, expanding from the position title of just director of VT Saves to director of, forgetting what the
So that's
office is
not-
now.
That's not in there.
That is dealt with separately.
So we can close out E-131.
E-131.1, again, treasurer requested language, the House accepted, expanding the municipal equipment loan fund to the municipal equipment and vehicle loan fund.
And close out.
Section E-131.2 on page 47. In the technical letter, the administration recommended some tweaks, and there was some concern relating the change from annually to biennially. So I recommend the committee have someone from the treasurer's office address this section and the recommended tweaks that were in the technical letter.
This is just 131.2.
Yes, the capital debt affordability advisory committee.
So biennial versus aids. That was that was in the technical letter, or does the original?
In the technical letter, the administration recommended changes to this language. So I would recommend the committee might like to hear further testimony on the intent of this change as requested by the treasurer.
And it's mainly that B1B on page 48. Or was this?
One also.
Oh, I got one. Okay, so didn't we hear from Gresham on that? Can you talk about that?
In the letter.
It's in the letter. So I guess the question, we could hear from the treasurer. Last trigger, if they want to send somebody to, or send information to respond to the your change the general number. Okay. So that's built in. That's a long.
A lot.
That took us to 133. Where's the bunch?
Yes, so section E-133, the House made updates to, this is one of the three sections that relates to the specific amount of money that's for each system's contribution to VPIC.
Why isn't there a E-132?
Let me see, I forget what B-132 is, but.
Oh, that's the
that
one
section-
that we talked about, that we got rid of. Some point in history. Remember?
Yeah.
When we went through
But I
the.
don't remember the history.
So that's unclaimed property. So if there was a section that related to unclaimed property fund, it would go in E-132.
Since there isn't, then there's no reason.
Right.
Fix it, okay. 133.
So E-133 and E-134 are just, the House tweaked the amount of money, here slightly, I think it's 250,000, across the systems, and so just making that number correction for that change to the portion, from those systems, it's their contribution to BPEC.
So if we agree with 250 to be, we would agree with this, but if we don't agree with that, then we wouldn't agree with this. I don't know if we want to keep that open. Your next question.
I don't really support the 200 plan to,
So we'll keep it open.
I mean, they work hard, but they were talking about 150% increases. So,
Yeah, it's over time, but yeah, $250,000 for year one of a transition.
it's more than they got. I mean, I understand they can get that on the open market and maybe should if it's just satisfied with their jobs. I would think we anyway, better than I make them walls. Right.
I think they did benchmark it to other.
Yeah,
pension systems.
and they were talking about getting to me.
Yeah.
So to them, it seemed very reasonable, but it was high topic.
It's, yeah, they did a lot. Okay, well, we'll leave it open for that.
Sections E134.1 and E134.2 relate to that same issue, so the committee should leave those sections open as well then. On page 54, section E139, this is
Brady, I'm sorry to stop you. Can I just ask, in the BAA, there was a waterfall language, the pension, 50% went to the pension.
That's the end of year construct.
The end of year customer. And I'm wondering on, and this takes it back a bit, unfortunately, but this new language that would allow a declared emergency and 10% to be, that. I'm just wondering what the status is of that pension money under the budget language. Because the BAA didn't pass, obviously, and
right. So as of now, there's no language modifying the fiscal year closeout, so it would go to the statutory requirement. So closeout language was notwithstanding 32 VSA 308A, or C rather, which would be the 50% split between the stabilization reserve and pensions. There's language in here amending what the BAA did, but there's no BAA, so those sections would need to be updated pending any committee decisions on the fiscal year closeout.
okay, so nothing that we're considering doing here besides that question, yeah.
Well, the house, in here, you mean here, or do you mean that section about
I mean, in the budget, because I'm forgetting about the BAA.
yeah. So in the budget, the house does have a year-end construct that does kind of earmark money.
Okay,
At the end.
and understood. I'm just wondering in this section, which is the general fund balance reserve, does that affect you?
So 308 directs funds per the statutory formula to the balance reserve. 308C is the 50% split between the stabilization reserve and pension systems. So the closeout language that the House had would fulfill the statutory requirement of 308 and notwithstand the statutory requirement of 308C.
I think what Senator Bruce is asking is this section, like on page 35, 36, like of the, if there's a reduction. If they use that to affect the amount of money that's left at the end of the fiscal year. Does it affect the year end?
Would this language affect the year-end construct?
Yeah.
No, nothing in that language itself.
And then just to close out, the House's budget, which we're working with, would interrupt the flow of that money to the pension.
Correct. But all of that language would for now have to stay open because it interplays with the budget adjustment, which does not exist. So it's amending something that
Okay,
was
just
in
a flag that
Yeah.
as we put that together, we need to keep our record.
Yeah.
Section E139 on page 54, grand list litigation assistance. This clarifies that the appropriation made in section B139 9,000 shall be transferred to the Attorney General and 70,000 shall be transferred to PDR. That's standard annual language.
Close that out.
Section E 142, this is pilot money. This is also standard annual language. And this is pilot for correctional facilities, excluding the Newport and Springfield.
Okay, close that out.
Section E 142.1 makes updates to statute for the pilot special fund relating to the following section. The strikeout of the city of Montpelier is a GovRec technical correction. And then the addition of subchapter 4C, you'll see that is being created in section E 142.2. The GovRec had language relating to a municipal municipal buyout program. This house language is the municipal grand list stabilization program. So slightly different program from the GovRec.
If the former mayor of Montpelier objects to the striking of the Montpelier Spuckle pilot, you wouldn't want to strike it here, I suppose.
Correct.
Before you would ask to keep that open, but I don't know if you got more, we got more.
I am feeling more comfortable with it now.
Or you're okay closing?
Okay.
Okay. Former mayor. Okay, we closed that out. The 142.2.
142.2, so this would be creating that municipal grand list stabilization program.
Oh, yeah. This was 5 million. 3 million? One.
Yes, so this is the $1 million pilot fund appropriation in the one-time section.
Does, where's that 1 million come from?
The pilot special fund.
Is that, did we not like that? Can't remember.
I think it's great.
I think we like, we can close that.
And then section E 142.3 on page 57. This is the flood prone property assistance programs. I know that there was a question relating to the funding available for that. I don't have an answer on that at this time. So the committee may want to leave that section open pending further information.
But you could still have this language, right? Like the,
Correct.
whether there's money or not, they could. You could keep it up. Consider what.
Sorry, why would we be thinking of it again?
I was just flagging for the committee. I do not have an answer about the funding for this at this time.
I also had a note here about the definition for flood property. How are we defining what metrics, what threshold would we need?
I would imagine that, I'm sure I can scrape statute. I'm sure that there's a definition of that somewhere.
Okay. Great.
Okay, so that's a,
Section E 144, this is the other pilot section, correctional facilities, standard in the language.
okay. I'm good with that. Which is 42.3.
Yes.
Do you have a question, Norris?
I did.
So you're on down the answer?
I did, thank you.
Yes, we're closing out E144. I'm going to propose we take a short break.
So.